The Galactic Evacuation Command Center buzzed with organized chaos. Holographic displays flickered with troop movements and casualty reports, while a dozen alien species argued in 17 languages about evacuation protocols. Even during planetary bombardment, there was always time for committee meetings. Commander Flixus of the Vorthan High Command stood at the center, his 6 crystalline arms gesticulating wildly. He looked like an expensive, irritated chandelier. "Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary entities," Flixus announced with self-importance, "we have successfully evacuated 97.4% of all priority personnel from Nexus 7. Our logistics are flawless, our execution pristine. What about the orphanage?" The gravelly voice came from the back, marinated in whiskey and disappointment. Every head turned to Captain Marcus Rodriguez, callsign Tank, leaning against the wall with crossed arms. Built, like his nickname suggested, all broad shoulders and stubborn angles. His human features looked primitive next to the elegant alien physiognomies, but his dark eyes held a sharpness that made officers shift uncomfortably. "I beg your pardon." Flixus's voice climbed an octave, producing a sound like breaking glass in a wind chime factory. Tank pushed off the wall, heavy boots echoing in the suddenly quiet command center. "The Zorlan Orphanage, 47 cubs, ages 3 to 16, located in Sector 7 Gamma, right in your acceptable loss zone." He gestured at the tactical display, where a small building blinked red. "Those little furry things that cry when scared and die when you blow them up." Lieutenant Curix, a nervous Keplerian whose tentacles turned pale blue with anxiety, consulted his datapad. "Sir, according to Evacuation Priority Matrix 77LA OWL, orphaned juveniles of non-allied species fall under Category Omega-9, which is..." His tentacles went albino. "Designated as acceptable collateral." "Acceptable collateral," Tank repeated flatly. "That's what we're calling kids now?" Flixus straightened all 6 arms. "Captain Rodriguez, while your emotional attachment to biological preservation is admirable in its primitive simplicity, we must consider the larger strategic picture. Those cubs have no political or economic value to justify resource expenditure. Plus," Crix added helpfully, "Zorlan cubs are extremely difficult to transport. They panic in confined spaces, require specialized atmospheric conditions, and the bureaucratic paperwork would take 3 days. Enemy artillery reaches their position in 6 hours. Tank interrupted, pointing at enemy forces advancing like a red tide. The command center erupted in alien languages, all variations on "not our problem." Tank listened to debates about atmospheric requirements while children waited to die, feeling that familiar itch between his shoulder blades. That meant he was about to do something court-martial worthy. Again, Flitzes raised all 6 arms for silence. "Captain Rodriguez, your concern is noted. However, we cannot risk valuable assets for a rescue with such low strategic success probability. Perhaps you could explain acceptable losses to your human superiors?" Tank studied the tactical display quietly. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. "You know what I love about you folks? You've got the whole galaxy organized and filed in neat boxes. Everything has protocols, procedures, proper forms in triplicate." He met each alien gaze. "But you forgot something." "What did we forget?" Flixus asked with patronizing patience. Tank's smile could cut titanium. "You forgot that humans don't follow your rules." He was walking toward the exit before the shouting started. 20 minutes later, Tank was aboard the Unreasonable Devotion, a name his ex-wife had suggested that seemed more prophetic each year. The vessel was a Terran-modified Keplerian freight hauler. Fancy talk for, someone took a perfectly good alien spaceship and let humans mess with it until it barely functioned but could survive anything. The bridge was a monument to human engineering philosophy. If it's not held together with duct tape and bad decisions, you're not trying hard enough. 3 alien control systems, jury-rigged with human components, created an interface that looked archaeological but somehow kept them flying. Tank activated his personal log. "Just received my official assignment from our crystal-headed friends. Seems I'm tasked with evacuating non-Perenity assets from Nexus 7. Translation: the stuff everyone forgot until it became inconvenient." He'd been the go-to guy for impossible missions since the Battle of Kepler's Edge, where he'd rammed his damaged cruiser into a Vorthan flagship and somehow survived. The official report called it tactically unsound but strategically effective. The unofficial report called it typical human insanity that somehow worked. His comm system chirped. Flixus's crystalline face appeared, all 6 arms positioned in barely controlled fury. "Captain Rodriguez, you will proceed to Nexus 7 and evacuate salvageable assets from non-preemitter zones. You will not engage enemy forces. You will not deviate from approved protocols. You will not..." "Let me guess," Tank interrupted. "I will not embarrass the Alliance or make you look bad for forgetting kids. Your mission parameters are clear. Retrieve what can be reasonably saved, document what cannot, and return for debriefing. Simple enough for even a human. Tank studied Flixus's face, noting the averted eyes. That was the tell. Every species had one. Flixus wasn't just angry, he was ashamed. You're absolutely right, Commander. Simple enough for even a human. As Flixus's image faded, Tank began pre-flight. The unreasonable devotion hummed to life. Systems that had no business working together, achieving basic functionality. Computer, plot course for Nexus 7, Sector 7 Gamma. Course plotted, the AI responded, sounding helpful yet deeply resigned. Tank had programmed it based on his old drill sergeant. 4 hours, 37 minutes at maximum burn. Captain, this mission has a 94% probability of ending in destruction, capture, or court-martial. Tank, engage the engines. That's what they pay us for. What he didn't mention was that somewhere in the galaxy were 47 scared kids written off as acceptable collateral, and Marcus Rodriguez had never been good at accepting the unacceptable. Nexus 7 looked like someone had systematically bombed a decent planet back to the Stone Age. Rolling hills and forests now resembled an angry lunar landscape. Smoke columns rose from impact craters, and the aurora borealis was replaced by the less romantic glow of burning infrastructure. Tank brought the ship down through debris and occasional missiles that hadn't gotten the ceasefire memo. The sensor painted a picture of widespread destruction, and enough ambient radiation to make a Geiger counter weep. The orphanage sat in what had been a pleasant valley, surrounded by pastoral scenery now redecorated with high explosives. The building was a miracle of Zorlan architecture, flowing curves and organic lines that seemed to grow from the landscape. It was also under bombardment. Tank set down in the former playground, wincing as landing struts crunched through swing-set remains. The orphanage walls shimmered with emergency shields, each impact sending ripples across the energy barrier. The walk to the front door was educational in modern warfare. Tank dove for cover, twice, as artillery screamed overhead, and something with too many teeth tried to eat him from a crater that hadn't existed during orbital reconnaissance. He knocked, which seemed absurd given the circumstances, but his mother had raised him to be polite. The door revealed a Zorlan female who looked like she'd stepped from a fairy tale, if fairy tales featured badass space nuns serving tea during bombardments. Sister Melodia was ancient even by Zorlan standards, her silver fur marked with elaborate religious patterns. She stood barely chest-high, but carried quiet authority that made generals nervous. Captain Rodriguez, I presume. Please, come in. You're just in time for afternoon tea. Tank stared as something exploded nearby. Sister, are you completely insane? Quite possibly. But insanity is often indistinguishable from faith. Children, we have a visitor. 47 Zorlan cubs emerged from hiding spots throughout the spacious, cozy hall. They ranged from toddlers who could barely walk to teenagers trying to look brave while their world fell apart. All different shades of fur, with large, expressive eyes that made Zorlans look perpetually worried. Right now, they had reason to worry. The youngest clung to Sister Melodia's robes, while older cubs formed protective clusters around smaller siblings. They watched Tank with curiosity and fear, taking in his human features and military uniform. A teenage cub with white markings stepped forward. Honored Captain, I am Kip, eldest of this house. We understand our evacuation presents logistical challenges. We do not wish to be burdens. Tank looked at this kid trying to sound adult while his world burned, and felt something twist in his chest. Son, you're not a burden. You're the reason I'm here. Sister Melodia gestured toward a tea service somehow maintained despite the ongoing apocalypse. Captain, perhaps we should discuss the situation. Children, continue your lessons. Lessons? Tank dodged a small cub chasing what appeared to be a domesticated ball of fluff. Sister, there's a war outside. All the more reason to maintain routine. These children have lost homes, families, their entire world. Routine is all they have left. Tank accepted excellent tea served in a combat zone, and watched cubs continue daily activities. Older ones helped younger ones with mathematics, while others worked on art projects. It was surreal. This pocket of normalcy and chaos. So, how do you plan to evacuate 47 children when your ship has maximum passenger capacity of 12? Tank nearly choked. How did you? I may be a nun, but I'm not stupid. I've researched human evacuation protocols. Your vessel is a modified Keplerian freight hauler designed for cargo, not passengers. The math is simple. Something large impacted close enough to shake the building. Younger cubs whimpered while older ones immediately provided comfort in well-practiced protective circles. Next transport won't arrive for 3 days, Tan said quietly. Enemy forces will be here in 6 hours. Sister Melodia nodded calmly. Yes, I suspected as much. Which means you'll have to do something typically human, which her smile could cut glass. Improvise. Tank set down his teacup and pulled out his tactical scanner. Sister, I need everything about this building. Layout, structural integrity, and any way out that doesn't involve walking through a war zone. I wondered when you'd ask about the old mining complex. The what now? She gestured toward a faded tapestry concealing what looked like a sealed doorway. This orphanage wasn't always an orphanage. 50 years ago, this valley was the Nexus 7 primary excavation site. They mined crystalline matrices until deposits ran dry. Underground tunnels? An entire network. Connects to old processing facilities 15 kilometers north. Outside the combat zone and near what used to be the planetary spaceport. Used to be? Bombed 3 days ago. But landing pads are intact, and there are usually cargo vessels parked there. Abandoned ones, since crews evacuated. Tank stared. Sister, are you suggesting we steal enemy supply ships using abandoned mining tunnels to evacuate 47 miners across hostile territory? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Tank began pacing, mind racing through logistics. It was insane, impossible, court-martial worthy. It might work. I need to know what we're working with. Who has technical experience? Kip stepped forward, still projecting adult authority despite being 16. Most of us have basic maintenance training. Sister Melodia believes in practical education. A smaller cub with brown stripes raised her hand tentatively. I can reprogram navigation computers. And Jax knows security systems. Tank looked at the indicated scrawny teenager with nervous energy suggesting electronic trouble for years. Security systems? Jax mumbled something in rapid Zorlan. Sister Melodia's mouth twitched with amusement. Jax has talent for creative problem solving with locked doors and restricted access panels. I've been channeling those skills constructively. Perfect. What about the little ones? The question sparked excited chatter as younger cubs volunteered information about various skills. Tank learned they had budding pilots, a girl who could mimic any voice, explaining how they'd ordered supply deliveries after adult supervisors evacuated, and twins with supernatural ability to crawl through impossibly small spaces. Here's the plan, Tank said, crystallizing something either brilliant or suicidal. Mining tunnels get us to the spaceport undetected. Once there, we acquire, meaning steal, enough ships to transport everyone. Older cubs help with operations, younger ones stay safe and follow orders. If we encounter enemy forces, Kip asked. Tank's smile was sharp and humorless. Then we improvise. Loudly, Sister Melodia moved to a wall panel, revealing equipment that raised Tank's eyebrows. Emergency beacons, portable shield generators, military-grade comm units. Sister, what exactly did you do before becoming a nun? Logistics coordinator for the Zorlan Deep Space Mining Consortium. 40 years getting equipment and personnel in and out of supposedly inaccessible places. Old habits die hard. Anything else I should know? She opened another panel, revealing an unmistakable weapons locker. Not military-grade, but defensive armaments mining operations used against claim jumpers and hostile wildlife. Sister, you're not your average nun. I spent 4 decades keeping miners alive in dangerous conditions. A few artillery shells don't scare me. The building shook violently. Enemy forces were getting close. Everyone listen up, Tank called, getting all 47 cubs' attention. We're going on a field trip. It'll be dark, scary, and dangerous, but if we stick together and follow the plan, we're all going home alive. Youngest cubs looked terrified, clinging to older siblings. But the older ones, led by Kip, stood straighter with determination that reminded Tank why he'd volunteered for this mission. Jax, you're with me on point. I need those security bypass skills. Kip, you're in charge of the middle group. Keep everyone together and quiet. Sister Melodia takes the rear with anyone needing extra help. What about weapons? Kip asked. Tank looked at energy rifles, then at faces around him. Some were barely old enough to tie shoes, let alone handle military equipment in combat. Weapons stay with adults. Your job is staying alive and reaching safety. Leave fighting to me. Sister Melodia finished distributing emergency supplies to older cubs, each now carrying survival gear. The operation's efficiency suggested they'd drilled for this scenario. Tunnel entrance is behind the tapestry, she explained. Sealed for decades, but structurally sound. Tank examined the museum Quelly lock. This might take. Jack stepped forward with a small electronic device. 3 seconds later, the lock clicked open. The tunnel beyond was dark, musty, and horror movie worthy. Ancient mining equipment sat abandoned along walls. Tank's flashlight revealing passage stretching into blackness. Emergency lighting strips flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows. 15 kilometers through this. 15 kilometers to freedom, Sister Melodia corrected. Assuming your ship-stealing plan works. Tank shouldered his rifle and entered the tunnel. Sister, I've been making impossible plans work for 20 years. I'm not stopping now. Behind him, 47 Zorlon cubs folded a human into darkness, trusting him to lead them to safety through a plan violating 37 military regulations and at least 4 interstellar treaties. Sometimes the most important victories came from throwing the rulebook out the airlock and doing what was right instead of proper. The mining tunnels were monuments to industrial optimism and subsequent abandonment. What had been engineering marvels now resembled enormous mechanical digestive tracts, complete with ambient noises suggesting either failing supports or very large, hungry creatures. Tank led through darkness thick enough to chew, his tactical flashlight cutting narrow beams through air. Behind him, 47 pairs of Zorlan eyes reflected light like tiny stars, creating constellations of trust and terror that made his chest tight with responsibility. 2 hours in, they reached the junction chamber, a massive cavern where 5 tunnel systems converged. Ancient machinery hulked in shadows like sleeping giants, ceiling disappearing into darkness above, flickering emergency lighting that refused to admit obsolescence. From here, northern passage for 3 kilometers brings us up beneath the old cargo handling facility, Sister Melodia explained, consulting a hand-drawn map from original mining operations. Tank's scanner started making the noise that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Contact. Multiple signatures approaching from the eastern tunnel. How many? Sister Melode asked calmly, despite being trapped underground with 47 children and no escape route. 8. Moving fast, with enough firepower to level city blocks. Distinctive whines of enemy patrol vehicles echoed through tunnels, growing louder. Tank's mind raced through unappealing options. They could hide and hope patrols passed, but 47 children weren't renowned for remaining silent under pressure. They could retreat, but that meant backtracking hours with hostile forces potentially cutting off escape. Or they could do something typically human. Jax, remember those security bypass skills? The teenage cub nodded nervously. How do you feel about bypassing safety protocols on a 50-year-old mining laser? Jax looked at ancient equipment, eyes widening as he understood. Captain, those things cut through solid rock. If we activate one here, we bring down the tunnel and trap ourselves underground, Tank finished. Unless we time it perfectly and collapse the eastern passage while escaping through the northern one. Sister Melodia stared. That's possibly the most dangerous plan I've ever heard. Thank you. I take pride in my work. Patrol vehicles grew closer, engines echoing like mechanical thunder. Tank could hear voices in harsh combat Keplerian. They were searching methodically, checking each side passage. Everyone get behind the largest equipment you can find, Tank ordered, hands dancing across ancient controls. When I say run, you run for the northern tunnel and don't look back. What about you? Kip asked. I'll be right behind you, Tank lied smoothly. Someone had to operate the laser, and it wouldn't be any of the children. Jax appeared at his elbow, small fingers working at secondary controls with focused intensity. Captain, I can slave the firing sequence to delayed activation. 30-second delay should give us time to reach minimum safe distance. Tank looked at this scrawny teenager calmly jury-rigging industrial equipment while enemy forces closed in. Jax, you are absolutely terrifying. Thank you, sir. The first patrol vehicle rounded the corner, searchlights sweeping across abandoned equipment. Tank could see armored soldier silhouettes, weapons ready, moving with professional caution that meant they were very good at their jobs. Now would be good, Sister Melody observed mildly. Jack's fingers flew across controls one final time. Firing sequence armed. 30 seconds on my mark. Mark, run, Tank ordered. The next 30 seconds were the most terrifying of Tank's life. 47 cubs and one elderly nun sprinted through abandoned mining complex while Tank provided covering fire with a rifle, pathetically inadequate against military patrol vehicles. Cubs moved with surprising speed and coordination, older ones helping younger ones while Sister Melodia brought up the rear with determined efficiency. Enemy patrols spotted them, searchlights sweeping as armored vehicles maneuvered for better positions. Energy bolts sizzled through air, leaving scorch marks and sending spark showers cascading into darkness. Tank reached the northern tunnel entrance as the last cub disappeared into the passage. Behind him, patrol vehicles spread out, trying to flank while maintaining suppressing fire. He dove into the tunnel just as concentrated weapons fire turned his previous position into a crater. The patrol followed, vehicles too large for tunnels but soldiers perfectly capable of foot pursuit. The mining laser activated with a sound like the universe clearing its throat. For a moment, the entire tunnel system filled with blinding light. Then the eastern passage collapsed, with endless roaring, tons of rock and machinery cascading down to block the tunnel completely. In sudden silence, 47 children and 3 adults found themselves alone in northern passage darkness, cut off from pursuit, but also from retreat. Well, Sister Melodia observed cheerfully, that was exciting. Tank checked his scanner. The way ahead was clear, and they were less than a kilometer from the spaceport. Behind them, collapsed tunnel would keep enemy forces busy for hours while they dug through debris. "Is everyone all right?" Chorus of young voices confirmed that miraculously, no one had been injured in their desperate sprint. Cubs were scared, exhausted, and covered in 50 years of tunnel dust, but they were alive. "The cargo facility is just ahead," Sister Melodia reported. "From there, short surface transit to landing pads where our transportation awaits." About that transportation, I should mention that commandeering enemy cargo vessels is technically piracy under interstellar law. "Captain," Sister Melodia replied with audible smile, "after what we've accomplished, a little piracy seems almost mundane." Tank had to admit she had a point. They'd successfully infiltrated enemy territory, traversed 15 kilometers of abandoned tunnels, and escaped pursuit by bringing down half a mountain. Stealing cargo ships seemed anticlimactic by comparison. Of course, they still had to actually steal the ships, load 47 children, and escape the planet before enemy reinforcements arrived. But Tank had always been an optimist. 3 weeks later, Tank stood at attention in the Galactic Command briefing room before a tribunal assembled specifically to make him uncomfortable. Commander Flixus occupied center position, crystalline exoskeleton practically vibrating with bureaucratic indignation. Admiral Vexai of the Andromedan Fleet had been a disturbing shade of orange since Tank entered. General Crux of the Terran Defense Force looked like he was trying very hard not to smile. "Captain Rodriguez," Flixus began with official displeasure, "you stand accused of multiple violations of military protocol, unauthorized appropriation of enemy assets, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and conduct unbecoming an officer." Tank reviewed the past 3 weeks, wondering how they'd compressed his crimes into such a short list. The unauthorized appropriation alone should have taken pages, considering he'd commandeered 7 cargo vessels, 2 fuel tankers, and what appeared to be a mobile command post the Cubs had mistaken for a playground. Furthermore, your reckless actions resulted in complete destruction of a historically significant mining complex, collapse of over 2 kilometers of tunnel systems, and creation of what geological surveys classify as a medium-sized artificial canyon. In my defense, sir, the canyon wasn't intentional. Admiral Vexai shifted to deeper orange that meant either extreme anger or acute indigestion. Given circumstances, Tank bet on anger. "Captain Rodriguez," General Crux interjected with hint of amusement, "perhaps you could explain what you thought you were accomplishing." Tank straightened and met each gaze in turn. "I was following orders, sir. I was tasked with evacuating non-Princity assets from Nexus 7. Mission accomplished." "Following orders." Flixus's voice shattered crystal ranges. "You destroyed half a planet, stole enemy vessels, and turned 47 children into accomplices to interstellar piracy. The children were extremely helpful, especially Jax. That kid has real talent for electronic warfare, and the twins were invaluable for reconnaissance. You'd be amazed how many places you can hide when you're 3 feet tall and furry." "This is not a joke, Captain." Flixus slammed 4 hands simultaneously, creating small avalanche sounds. 18. Tank corrected helpfully when Flixus mentioned 17 violated articles. I checked. General Crux was definitely trying not to smile. "Captain, the tribunal has reviewed your mission reports, all 732 pages. Perhaps you could summarize your actions?" Tank took a deep breath. Where to begin? Stealing cargo ships had been easy. Jax bypassed security in under 5 minutes, while Cubs served as lookouts and twins crawled through maintenance shafts, disabling alarms. Sister Melodia proved surprisingly adept at piloting spacecraft. The difficult part was discovering the stolen cargo ships contained complete intelligence archives for the entire enemy fleet. Battle plans, supply routes, communication codes. Tank found himself possessing enough classified information to end the war, presenting the minor problem of getting it back to friendly forces without being shot as enemy combatants. His solution had been typically human. Broadcast intelligence on all frequencies while simultaneously surrendering, claiming diplomatic immunity, and requesting medical assistance for 47 minor refugees. The resulting confusion kept enemy forces busy 6 hours, while Alliance ships moved in to secure the area. "Well, sir, we successfully evacuated all non-Privly assets. During the operation, we acquired significant intelligence materials that proved instrumental in ending the Vortin-Keplerian conflict. 0 casualties among protected persons. Mission parameters exceeded by approximately 400%. "You started a minor war," Admiral Vexai interjected, shifting to unidentifiable orange. "I ended a major war. The intelligence we recovered allowed Alliance forces to capture the entire enemy command structure within 72 hours. Flixus consulted his datapad violently. "Your actions may have contributed to favorable strategic outcome, but methods were completely unacceptable. You endangered civilian lives, violated treaties, and caused diplomatic incidents requiring highest-level government intervention. How are the kids? Tank asked. I beg your pardon. It's the Cubs, the 47 non-perimetry assets everyone was willing to write off as acceptable collateral. How are they? General Crux leaned forward. The Zorlan Cubs have been relocated to a safe world with excellent educational facilities. Sister Melodia has been appointed their guardian and requested assignment to the Galactic Alliance Refugee Resettlement Program. All 47 children are healthy, happy, and eager to continue education. Good, Tank said simply. That's it? Good? Sir, with respect, those kids were sentenced to death by bureaucratic indifference. Nobody would risk anything to save them because they lacked proper paperwork or political connections. So I did what humans do when the system fails. I ignored the system and did what was right and destroyed half a planet in the process. The planet was already being destroyed, sir. I just changed who was doing the destroying. Admiral Vexai reached orange. That suggested spontaneous combustion. Your cavalier attitude toward military discipline is exactly the problem with human integration. You people refuse to follow established protocols. That's not a bug, sir, Tank replied. That's a feature. The room fell silent except for Flixus's exoskeleton creaking under stress. Tank waited, knowing whatever they decided, he'd made the right choice. 47 kids were alive because he'd ignored rules. That was worth whatever punishment they wanted. Captain Rodriguez, General Crux said finally, this tribunal finds you guilty of gross insubordination, violation of military protocol, and conduct unbecoming an officer. He paused with ghost of a smile. You are sentenced to reduction in rank, forfeiture of 6 months' pay, and assignment to the newly created Galactic Alliance Special Operations Division. Tank blinked. Special Operations Division? The Alliance has decided it needs a unit specifically designed to handle situations falling outside normal operational parameters. Missions requiring creative problem-solving and flexible interpretation of regulations. Congratulations, Major Rodriguez. You're the commanding officer. Major? But you said I was being reduced in rank. From captain to major is technically a reduction in Andromedan fleet structure. Admiral Vexai explained, color shifting back toward normal. We thought you might appreciate the irony. Flixus leaned forward. Major Rodriguez, your new unit will specialize in impossible rescues, hopeless missions, and operations requiring someone willing to ignore every rule. Basically everything you've been doing anyway. But now it's official. Tank felt a grin spreading. And my first assignment? Sister Melodia has submitted a request for assistance with another refugee situation, General Crux said, sliding a datapad across the table. An entire colony of displaced families stranded in the Outer Rim with no official documentation and no legal way to evacuate them before their planet becomes uninhabitable. Tank picked up the pad and scanned mission briefings. Impossible odds, minimal resources, bureaucratic obstacles, and approximately 300 lives hanging in the balance. It sounded perfect. Sir, he said, snapping to attention with only slightly sarcastic salute. Major Rodriguez reporting for duty. As he left the briefing room, Tank could hear Flixus muttering about humans and their complete inability to follow proper procedures. But he could also hear General Crux laughing, and Admiral Vexai had shifted to grudging respect yellow, and his comm unit chimed with incoming message. From Sister Melodia, Director of Advanced Refugee Solutions. Major Rodriguez, I hear congratulations are in order. When can you be ready to depart? We have work to do. Tank looked out the viewport at stars scattered across darkness, like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there were 300 people who needed help, and a galaxy full of bureaucrats who would explain why helping them was impossible. He smiled and keyed his response. Sister, give me 6 hours to pack. Time to show the universe what humans do best. And what's that? We fix things, Tank said. Even when they're not supposed to be fixable, especially then.